Well, Hope City, today you are in for a treat. We have a very special opportunity for us. This opportunity only comes once in a lifetime, all right? I promise you this. It's once in a lifetime because today is Pastor Skylar's first Sunday preaching at Hope City Youth. At Hope City, excuse me. And not only that, I believe this is your first time preaching in front of in a church. And so this is a very unique opportunity. You guys are here for that, which is incredible. And so I want you guys to meet Pastor Skylar if you haven't met him yet. He has been serving, he and his wife Miranda have been serving as Hope City Youth, as our youth pastor here for several months now, and they've been doing an incredible job. If you haven't gotten a chance to meet him yet, here's what I would just preface Skylar with. Skylar is an incredibly genuine man. He loves the Lord, he loves his wife, and he loves our church. He serves our church, he serves our students, and he goes above and beyond. And it's an honor for me to have him on our staff team here. And so I'd ask you just to honor him and help me welcome Pastor Skylar as he brings today's message.
Good morning, guys. I am so grateful to be with you all here this morning. Like you said, my name is Pastor Skylar, and I am the youth pastor here at Hope City, and it has just been a privilege. You know, my wife Miranda and I have been here for a few months, like he was saying, and we have just enjoyed pouring into the lives of the students here at Hope City. And we've been making some amazing memories. In fact, recently, we just had our back-to-school bash, which, yes, there was like slip and slide, kickball, a lot of fun, but the purpose of this event was so that we could connect and encourage all these students as they went back and transitioned into school. We want to know that our students, no matter what is going on in their lives, that Hope City Youth is a place for them where you're felt welcomed and that you're going to be cared for. It's been exciting to see what God's doing and will continue to do in the lives of our students here at Hope City. And I just want to take a second real quick and just to say thank you because I'm so grateful to be part of a church that is for the next generation, and none of that is possible without Pastor Peter and Pastor Tiffany. So can we just take a quick second and just honor our pastors? Thank you. You know, if you've been following along over the last 7 weeks, you know, we've been talking about summer school, and we've been in this series where we've been covering different topics, and, you know, we've even heard from a couple different speakers, and I'm just so honored to be able to finish up here with this series this morning. Have you ever noticed that when you go to the store and you buy a picture frame, that there's always a photo in here when you buy it, right? And it's always the most interesting photo. I mean, it's like someone sitting in there smiling with the most flawless backdrop. Like, this is not a photo that you can just see and, like, take on a selfie on your iPhone, right? Like, that's not what they slap in there at the store. And, you know, when we buy one of these, we take this home and we're like, you know what? It's time to replace that with a photo of mine, right? Like, no one leaves a stock image in there. And and so what do we put in it, right? We put in a picture of our families or us with friends. Maybe it's a memory that you have or a place that you've been to. I would take a stab and say it's probably something sentimental to you. And you know what we don't put in here? We don't put in a picture of like maybe a candid photo of us on a sick day laying on the couch. At least that's not a photo that I'd put in here because I would not want to show that off around my place. But it's, you know, we frame the pictures that we truly love and the moments that we are grateful for. You know, we have all faced many, trials and gone through many seasons in our life that were anything but easy. And I think a lot of us would think of the last 2 years as a prime example of that. You know, with the pandemic and political unrest and just everything going on in our lives and around us. But I would say that back in 2019, I was going through a pretty rough time in my life. You know, at the time, I was in Bible college, and yes, I was a baby-faced teenager. I get it. Yep, clean-shaven, started growing out the beard, never looked back, not going to look back. And I'll tell you what, I really struggled with unmet expectations during that time. You know, I really had this excitement and idea of what Bible college was going to look like. And it turned out to be much different. You know, I'd moved across the country, from a small town in Ohio where my only means of adventure and fun was cornfields, to a big, crazy culture shock of a city in Los Angeles County, California. Everything basically in my life had changed. Suddenly, I was living in this big city. I was living in a dorm with a roommate, and I wasn't within 1,000 miles of any relative or friend that I had known. It was really hard to see the positive during that time, and I struggled with bitterness because it felt like all these changes around me were just closing in. You see, during this time, I was so easy to get bitter at the small things going around me because I was so far removed to everything that was familiar to me and that felt safe. And I had these two questions that were filling my head and just, I couldn't shake. And those questions were, God, why is this happening? Why does it feel impossible to be grateful? You see, I was trying to understand why I had a picture in this frame that wasn't how I pictured it. I was wondering why this picture was different. I had a preconceived idea of what was supposed to be in this frame. And maybe you found yourself asking yourself those same two questions of why is this happening, or why can't I see the positive in what's going on around me? Or maybe you're in a situation similar to the one I just described, where you found it hard to accept what's in your frame. Or maybe you just thought the picture was going to be different. For some of you, maybe that could look like a job loss. Maybe you had job security that isn't there anymore, and now you're wondering, how do I financially provide? For others of you, maybe it's a relationship issue. Maybe you're fighting with a sibling, and you just, no matter what you're doing, you just can't seem to get over whatever the issue is. Or maybe it's a friend at school that you're starting to notice that they're acting different when they're around you. Or maybe it's a child that you haven't seen in months or even years and talked to. You know, maybe you haven't had a relationship issue, or maybe it wasn't a job loss, but maybe it was a loss of a dream or dreams that you used to be so excited about. Maybe you thought you'd be married by now. Maybe you thought and expected to be starting a family. Slow down, Miranda, we're getting there, I promise. Or maybe you thought that you'd be owning a house by now. And just over the past couple years with the craziness of the market and everything going on, it's just thrown off your plans. I mean, maybe you had a dream that you were so passionate about, and now it just feels dead. I know that's hard. Because when you have a dream in your heart, it becomes personal. Maybe the picture that you wanted to see in this frame hasn't happened. Regardless of where you're at in your life right now, with living in a place of gratitude, it is something that takes an effort on our part. Let's take a look at a story that I think most of us are familiar with, especially those of you that remember growing up in church and going to Sunday school. And it's the story of Daniel in the lion's pit. You know, he had some moments that definitely would not make it into my frame, if I'm being honest. Daniel was a character in the Old Testament who was an Israelite at a time where Israel was under the power and authority of the Persian Empire. And you see, at the time, the Persian kingdom was ruled by King Darius, and underneath him, he had these 3 high-ranking officials, and underneath those 3 high-ranking officials were 120 satraps. You see, a satrap is basically like a local governor that would rule over a province in the Persian Empire. Well, Daniel happened to be one of these 3 high-ranking officials. Yet even more so, he was set to be overcharged the rest of the 2 and the 120 because he had such favor with the king. I mean, his frame at this point looks pretty positive. I mean, what more could you ask for in your frame? But as we're about to see, his picture is about to change. You see, the other 2 high officials and the 120 satraps, they did not like that he was set to be over them. So they plotted against him. And they looked and tried to find anything they could that was wrong with him, but they could find nothing wrong with him morally or legally. So they resulted in doing the only thing that they could do. They went to the king, and they tried to convince him to make it illegal to pray to any gods or any man other than the king himself for the next 30 days. So let's jump into the story at verse 10 of Daniel 6. It says, "Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. 'Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?' The king answered, 'The decree stands in accordance with the law of Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed.' Then they said to the king, 'Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day.' When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, 'Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict the king issues can be changed.' So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, 'May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you.'" You see, here's a guy that has it all going for him. He's relishing in the status and authority, yet he ends up thrown into a pit full of lions. Not quite the picture you want in this frame anymore, is it? How could he possibly have gratitude in a moment like this? You see, one of the first things that we can learn from Daniel is that a consistent gratitude requires a consistent relationship with God. Just like a lamp that needs to be plugged into a wall in order for it to be connected to a source of power, like that bulb needs electricity to run, and we need to be connected to our God, our source of life. You know, it's something that we need daily. It's not a 15-minute check it off the list type of thing. I mean, if you put a light bulb into a wall for 15 minutes and then unplug it, that thing doesn't stay on the rest of the day. At least not in my experience. I don't know about you. But we need an intentional time with God in prayer, in worship, and in Scripture. You see, that Daniel knew that prayer was so important that even when it was illegal, he was still faithfully praying to God 3 times a day. You see, Daniel didn't let circumstances dictate his consistency with God. I've honestly noticed a big difference in my own life when I look back at the times and I've not had consistency with being in the presence of God. It's been the times that I felt overwhelmed, confused, or even anxious. And I know that as I realize the more time I've spent with God, that I have this more overwhelming sense of peace that doesn't make any sense, even when everything around me tells me that I shouldn't. You know, over the past few months or so, I've been starting to get into this consistent morning routine where every morning I've had to wake up an hour earlier than I had been and spend intentional and undistracted time with God. I developed this routine of being alone with God in the morning, and that consistency has helped ease a lot of life's anxieties and situations. You see, being a newlywed, with my beautiful wife Miranda up there, is amazing and a lot of fun. However, there are definitely challenges that come along with that. You know, when we got married, there was 2 big questions that we had to answer. And that was, where are we going to live and where are we going to work? And Miranda and I have been married since September of last year, and it's been great. You know, it's been a big change to start living with someone and having to make decisions for 2, though, instead of 1. Over the course of the last few months, this consistency that I had been taking with God was really helping to ease my worries and trust in the guidance that God had over our situation of housing and also our situation of a job. You know, we've been super blessed and able to rent from my grandmother was such an amazing opportunity. However, she happens to be a snowbird, which means that she's coming back this winter. So we had a deadline approaching, and it was coming fast. And also, Miranda has been looking for a job as well in order to help ends meet as we transition our housing situation. You know, she had been helping out so much with the youth, and she's been doing such an amazing job. You know, I'm so grateful for the impact that she is making on all of our students, especially the girls here at Hope City Youth. And I couldn't imagine doing youth ministry without anyone else by my side. So thank you. However, we are always looking for youth volunteers. So make sure to email me later at Skylar@HopeCitySRQ.com. I'm kind of being serious, so I would love to meet with you. Well, God has been faithful and shown up in both areas of our lives with these two things. In fact, we're actually moving out later this week. Does anyone have a pickup truck? Just curious. Totally kidding. But Miranda has also started a job, and she's going to be working at a local school here in Sarasota as a teacher's aide. And it's something I know she's going to be amazing at. She's just going to be so great with these kids. And it's still going to allow her to have a schedule to pour into our youth students. And we're just so grateful for that. You know, God helped bring me to a place of gratitude because my consistency with him was stable even before our situation was. Because consistent gratitude requires a consistent relationship with God. You know, maybe you've been waiting for your situation to change before you step into gratitude. But Daniel shows us that we need to step into gratitude even before our situation changes. I wonder, maybe there's an area in your life where you can lean into God and be grateful. Where you could be consistently grateful in these moments because you're being consistent with God. Let's continue in verse 19 where it says, "At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, 'Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?' Daniel answered, 'May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty.' The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God." You see, in order to stay grounded in being grateful, Daniel had to have trust in God. And that's no different for us. Even in the times where we see no way out of the current trials or storms that we're in, or when you don't like the image maybe that you find in your frame. Because being grateful during trials takes trust in God. You see, Daniel was thrown into a pit with lions, but because of his trust in God, he didn't complain, he didn't get angry, and he didn't even give up. Even after he was wrongly imprisoned and thrown into the pit. I don't know about you, but I would not be super calm if I was thrown into a pit full of lions. Like, just being honest. You know, going back to how I said earlier that Miranda and I were needing to figure out some housing and a job situation for her, my consistency with God had helped tremendously with staying in a place of gratitude. So when Miranda did end up getting our job offer, we were originally looking for a full-time position, and to our surprise, we were offered a part-time position instead. And at that time, we were met with a choice that we had to make. We could either trust in God for what he has provided, or we could get upset because it wasn't exactly what we expected, what we wanted, or what we felt we needed. We can't wait for everything to be exactly right and the way we want it in order to be grateful. We decided to be grateful and trust God, knowing that this was him showing up and being faithful, even though it wasn't fully what we wanted or what we expected. You see, well, as Miranda was accepting this offer, on the same day she was about to go in to the office to get an offer letter, she got an email less than an hour before saying, "Hey, we actually have a full-time position that has just opened up. Do you want it?" And it was doing the same thing, an even better grade. And so we, of course, accepted it immediately and knew that this was God providing. It really felt like gratitude during that time that we had just kept growing and growing, and I truly believe it was because we trusted God during that process. I challenge you to think about some of those moments in your life when you had this choice that you had to make like that. Maybe it's something recently, maybe it's something going on today where you have to choose if you're going to be grateful and trust God, or maybe you let the bitterness get to you a little bit. Either way, you will come face to face with more of these moments in life. So how will you respond next time you face that decision? Daniel shows us just how impactful it is to choose gratitude. Let's go back to verse 20 real quick. It says, when he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? And Daniel answered, may the king live forever. Daniel's response is something I think most of us would just scratch our heads at and wonder, how on earth could you say something like that after being treated wrongfully, in prison and thrown into a pit full of lions? I mean, isn't it just amazing that he chose to answer in such an honoring and positive way? One might even say with gratitude. I know that I've had moments where I have been wronged or mistreated, and I'll tell you what, honestly, I've not been able to respond or react the way that Daniel did here. It's so easy to get upset, and it's so easy to justify responding out of our hurt and our ungratefulness. But as followers of God, we're called to a healthier and a better way. What is the first thing that you're saying when stuff happens in your life? Are you saying, may my boss live forever, when you're called into work to cover a shift on your day off? Or maybe, what about the person who is treating you so mean at school? Are you wishing that they find peace and joy? Or maybe, do you say, may my friends find success wherever they go, even when it feels like nothing around you is going your way? Most of us would probably say no. But Daniel is showing us the example of how we can grow in our gratitude. Let's continue at verse 25. It says, then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and have reverence for the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Isn't that amazing? I mean, what a response that we see from King Darius because of the gratitude and faithfulness of Daniel. King Darius actually puts into legislation to recognize what Daniel decided to do and trust God. As if this story hasn't been impactful and encouraging enough, we not only see that Daniel was impacted, but also King Darius was moved because of Daniel's gratitude. Because gratitude in our lives reveals God to others. Daniel shows us what an unwavering gratitude towards God can do in our life and the lives around us. And because of this gratefulness that he continued to have with God, like I said, King Darius put into legislation to recognize the God of Daniel. And you see, Daniel had nothing to do with being unharmed and safe from the lions other than simply trusting in God to move on his behalf because he knew God was faithful. Isn't it amazing how much hope and impact that you can receive from simply witnessing someone with an unwavering gratitude like Daniel? I mean, maybe you've had a moment in your life where you've seen someone be grateful or have a positive attitude in a way that just makes absolutely no sense to you. And yet, somehow, that impacted you in a real way. As I shared earlier, I'm a newlywed and I've been married for just under a year. And I still remember those weeks and months leading up to that day. I was so excited and ready to marry Miranda. I knew it was the biggest blessing that God had given me, and I couldn't wait to say I do on that day. However, my childhood friend that I considered a brother wasn't able to be there because he was getting deployed overseas during that time. He was supposed to be my best man. And that was really difficult because I was so ready and I was excited to marry Miranda, and it hit me that I wasn't going to have him up there with me to support me on the best day of my life. I wanted that picture in my frame. The one of Miranda and I so excited and happy of being married, and then my friend up here in the background cheering us on, just like, yeah, let's go. And in fact, the morning of my wedding, I remember getting breakfast with my dad and crying because I knew that picture wasn't going to happen. I had not really dealt with my emotions up until then, and I may not have had my friend to support me on that day, but that's when God brought to my memory another picture in my mind. This picture right here with my dad. Who's really been someone that I could lean on, someone that's always been there for me. I have honestly thanked God so much for my dad, who's been my role model for as long as I can remember. And I just want to say real quick, thank you, Dad. Thank you. And you know what? My wedding day was amazing. I get to marry my best friend and have the best day of my life. And I will remember that forever. I didn't end up with the picture that I thought it was, but I ended up with a picture in my frame that was better than I could have imagined. You see, gratitude is a practice. It doesn't happen on accident. It takes effort on our end to stop and make the choice to be grateful for what we can. Maybe it doesn't feel like much is going right your way, or there's not a lot to be grateful for, but you can always be grateful for God and his faithfulness in your life. Or maybe you can just be grateful for the little things, like having all of your needs met with the food that you get to eat and the place that you get to sleep at night. You see, gratitude reframes your circumstances. So I wonder, what has God done for you that you could put in this frame? What would you show off to others? Where has God been good to you? If you're here today and you're thinking, I want to put some gratitude into practice in my own life, then I believe here's some practical steps that we can take. Number one, we can make time for God. Just like Daniel, we need to take time out of our day and spend time with God. We need to be connected and be with our source. For me and my routine, it was about setting aside time and not so much on how exactly I was spending it. You see, some days I was reading in scripture, and other days I was sitting before God in silence, and then other days I would journal or pray. The important thing is that we create a time and space to commune with God and be available for him to speak to us. How can you make time for God this week? What would that look like for you? Number two, we can be proactive and not reactive. Just like we need to create time for God, we also need to be able to recognize that not everything that we have planned will go according to our plan. Things outside of our control will come and interrupt us. That's just a given. But we need to be able to be prepared to be thrown off and not just react to everything going on around us. What's an area that you feel reactive in lately? Or where is some place in your life that you need to be proactive? And number three, tell others about what God has done. Let your lives speak to others as you receive joy from a grateful heart and attitude. And tell people all about the great things God has done or is doing in your life. It doesn't matter how small or insignificant you may think that it is, it might be exactly what someone needs for an encouragement. Let your lives speak to others. Just take a step of faith and begin to share with others. I want you to take a second right now and just imagine, what would it look like if you started practicing and choosing gratitude in your own life? What would that look like? How would that affect others? How might that impact you? Imagine the possibility of a community of people that were so grateful and in gratitude that it was so infectious to everyone around us, even in the midst of adversity. As we close out today, let's continue to push in and choose a life of gratitude and watch as gratitude reframes